Let's get started, everyone. Welcome to this is day one of the second Brain Summit, our second session, and I'm joined by August Bradley. I'm super excited. August, let me introduce him. August has a super impressive resume, 25 years of experience with a Harvard Business School MBA. You've built 3 successful companies and consulted for many more. And now you're sharing so much of your expertise around performance enhancement and optimization for free on your YouTube channel, which is excellent, by the way. And you also run a Notion life design course to help people wake up excited every day and make progress towards what matters most. And so today, August is sharing with us more about life design and why we should create a life operating system, and what this has to do with systems thinking and personal knowledge management. First, you have a presentation prepared for us, and then we will jump into some Q&A. So thanks for joining us today, August.
Awesome, Julia. Thank you so much. And I am so insanely excited to be a part of this Second Brain Summit, the first one of its kind. It's incredibly thrilling and super impressive what you guys have pulled together. So everyone from Tiago Forte and Julia and the entire Forte Labs team, thank you for putting this resource together for free for the whole community, for us all to come together and explore ideas. It's a real privilege to be a part of it, and I'm just thrilled to be here. So thank you guys. And hello to all of you. This is a real privilege as well to be sharing this time with you guys. What an exciting time it is in knowledge management, life design, all of these aspects. We have incredible tools, but we also have incredible insight and better understanding than ever about how to design and build the lives we want. The psychology is more clear than ever. The tools and techniques, I mean, there's just so many things coming together. It's an amazing moment in history in that regard. So with that in mind, let's dive into this session. So today we are going to explore a couple concepts. We're going to explore the idea of systems thinking, a framework on how to view the world that may be new to some of you, and some of you may be somewhat familiar, but don't know how to apply it in a practical sense. I want to first explore what it is and then talk about how we can use it in a very practical way. And then the idea of a life operating system, where we bring our life management and our knowledge management together in a holistic way so that we can get more out of these tools and more out of the effort and work that we put into it so that it fuels more insight, understanding, output, creativity, all those things that we're trying to achieve. It's let's think holistically about how we can bring this all together. My journey to this point was unintentional in a lot of ways. For many years, I was doing business consulting, operational efficiency for companies of all sizes, how to design systems and processes to achieve desired outcomes with the minimal friction and effort and all that. And as I was working with a lot of companies that had strong leadership from founders and owners, they could be small companies with 5 people up to 50, 70 people, but they had owners and founders who were so deeply intertwined with the business. I was discovering that it didn't matter how efficient the company was. If the lives of the founders and owners were in disarray or in chaos or misaligned, it would completely seep into the company and throw the company in just chaos and disalignment and disorder. And no matter what we did with the company systems, if these smaller companies with these strong founder-owner presence didn't have well-designed life systems, those individuals leading, and of course this trickles down to everybody. If you don't have good life systems in place for yourself, your work's going to be in chaos. And vice versa. If your work is in chaos, you're going to have anxiety. You're going to be limited in how well and how successful your personal life can be. All of this is so deeply interrelated that I found that I couldn't successfully implement for the company if I wasn't also doing implementation for the founders and owners, and then increasingly for the teams and employees across the company. So that is what caused my whole work to shift from team business implementations to personal individual implementations. And then in many cases, the integration of the two working together. Because our life includes our personal life, but it also includes our work. Our work is part of our lives. These are not separate compartments that exist independently of each other. They are deeply integrated. And so we should think of this very holistically, and we should have systems and processes in place that work harmoniously together. So with that, let's dive into our sort of an upfront presentation, and then we're going to turn it more into a bit of a workshop where we can get more interactive and I can hear where you guys want to dig deeper. All right. So the three areas we're going to touch on here in this session we have together is systems thinking. I'm going to introduce the concept and dig a little deeper to frame it so that we are all on the same page with the same concept. Then the idea of a life operating system, what it is, how to do it. And then I'm going to use as an example the Pillars, Pipelines, and Vaults system, a life operating system that I've developed and that I teach, as an example of how we can very specifically implement a life operating system. And the PPV system emphasizes focus, alignment, and resurfacing in context. We'll talk about all of these as we get going. All right, so first off, systems thinking. What is this? We're traditionally taught to study component parts. So systems thinking is not a natural thing for most of us. It's not the way society tends to push us. It's not how school works. It's not how most of our jobs work. Most of our jobs, most of our lives are all about breaking things down in components. You do this one part, the assembly line, where everybody has one job on the assembly line. You know that one part. Or studying, if you're studying medicine, you're studying all these different classes, different parts of the human anatomy. Engineering, you have different component parts. We traditionally teach ourselves, teach our society, and then when we get into the workforce, we have specialized roles. We're broken into components and we focus on our component. And in the case of education, the idea is you learn the components and then you put them together and you have the whole, right? So that is the traditional approach. Extrapolate components into an understanding of the whole. That's the norm, the default in modern societies. But if you think about a car as an example, it's not defined by its parts. It's not, if someone asks you what a car is, if they didn't know, you wouldn't say, oh, it's a seatbelt and a steering wheel and a tire, 4 of them in fact, and an engine and this and that. That's not really what defines a car. A car is defined by what it does within the larger transportation system. Now, so the car itself is a system, but its definition is what the role it plays in the larger system that it's a part of. So really, what matters most about anything is the role it plays in the larger systems that it functions within. So that gives us an insight right off the bat of the role of hierarchical systems and systems within systems. So all systems are part of larger systems, and every system is defined by its function in the larger system. So as I encourage you to think more and more and look at the world from a systems thinking perspective, this is the starting point. Understand that whatever you're looking at, there is a bigger picture around it. And everything is as we're going to talk about here very shortly, there's going to be a series of loops, a series of cycles. And a lot of the components in relational operations are outside of whatever the system is you're looking at. So that can cause a lot of misleading interpretations if you're just looking at a very finite, smaller window. All right, so a system's worthwhile properties, its functions, derive from the interactions of its parts, not the parts taken separately. So the thing that we're interested in a system is not even in existence when we look at it in its component parts. So this is right off the bat giving us a look at the shortcomings of studying and learning about things as components within a larger, breaking things down and just emphasizing the components. The thing of interest doesn't even exist when you're looking at the components. Systems thinking reveals properties and causal relationships in systems that do not exist in their components. So what we're really trying to understand is a series of cause and effect relationships. The world is based on cause and effect. Everything is cause and effect. So when we're looking at any finite system, there will be causes that are happening outside the system, creating effects inside the system you're looking at, and it's going to look random if you're just looking at the one system. When we start looking at the systems that our systems are within, then we see a more logical series of cause and effect relationships. The phenomenon of new qualities forming beyond the core properties when they work together is called emergence. This is the fundamental principle of systems thinking, the concept of emergence. This is the word for those things that exist only where the system is working together and do not exist in the component parts. So emergence is something we really want to understand when we're taking a systems thinking approach to the world. So emergence can be big and small, it can be profound, or it can be mundane. If you think of the human body or any animal body, you've got all these mechanical functions. Individually, none of those would hint at the concept of life or consciousness, which evolves and merges when you put them together. But if you just study a beating heart, if you just study the neurons in your brain firing, if you just study, the skin, the atoms, even at the atomic level, none of these individual components would suggest the concept of consciousness. Like, it's just mind-blowing. It's this thing that we can't even explain, yet we can explain the functioning of a body. So there are these what seem like magical properties until you really study systems. And in some cases, we still don't even understand how these emergent properties happen in the case of life and consciousness. Or just take something as simple as water. It's hydrogen and oxygen, the two particles that make up water. Now, neither hydrogen nor oxygen have the quality of wetness. Yet when you combine them, you get this property of wetness. It emerges. That's emergence. But studying hydrogen and oxygen, you're not going to understand, even together as two separate components side by side, you're not going to get this concept of wetness. Combine them, you have wetness. That happens at all levels of all systems. So, the ability to recognize emergence is a cornerstone element of systems thinking. If you can look at systems and identify what the emergence is, you're going to have insights into whatever you're looking at, because frankly, quite literally everything is part of systems. So you're going to have insights to share to conversations that most people who are looking at individual components aren't going to have to share. You're going to have more to contribute to conversations. And that makes us more valuable. Now, the ability to design for emergence in systems is a true superpower. And when we start talking about life operating systems, this is where it gets exciting. We can start designing for emergence, designing for these properties that arise that don't exist in the component parts. You can have a task management system and an isolated knowledge management system, and you can have some habit and routine design. But when you start integrating them, having them communicate with each other, we can have our list of goals, our list of values. But when we integrate them and they're informing each other and they're fueling each other, you get emergence. And when you can design a system that produces this emergence, that's where you get true superpowers in terms of our application here. So thinking very practically. So what are the things we can actually do and focus on? Well, 3 good examples. These are not the only ones, but these are 3 very practical ones. And if you just got a good concept of these, you'd be so far ahead of the game. The first, feedback loops. So feedback loops are iterating cycles. Systems have cycles after cycles. So feedback loops are where the previous iteration pours momentum and resources into the next iteration and either fuels it and builds it up or continues a process of degradation and breaking down. We'll talk more about that. Bottlenecks, what's holding up the most efficient flow of the system? Usually there's one point that is the constraint. If you can identify those, you can make your systems work better, produce more efficient and greater emergence. And balancing properties, we'll talk more about these at the end. So we'll bookmark that one. That's a good example that plays a big role in our life operating systems. All right, so you look for patterns and echoes of those patterns so that you can find the feedback loops. Feedback loops is, if you focus on just one area, if you can design the right feedback loops, you will be supercharging your life systems. So let's look at this in a little more depth. So we've got these systems that have all these patterns and circles. Now, when you look at systems and then you start looking at the systems that your systems are within, so tiers of systems, you're going to see patterns that repeat themselves. They repeat themselves in small ways and they repeat themselves in big ways. It's a total fractal design. So however micro you zoom in or how macro you zoom out, you will see very similar patterns occurring and recurring. So you want to start in studying a system and bringing a systems thinking approach is looking for these recurring patterns. And then you want to identify which of those recurring patterns are feedback loops. Feedback loops, once again, are where the momentum and resources of the previous iteration pour into the next one. So they build. So inside the feedback loops, you want to identify causality. Everything is cause and effect. What is the initial trigger that starts this chain reaction and then iterates over and over again? You want to really deliberately look for causality. And as we'll see when we start designing systems, you'll want to design causality. Everything is cause and effect. These are buried inside patterns and feedback loops. So you want to just study these patterns and understand the cause and effect relationships. Again, so many of the causes will often be outside of the system you're focused on, but you'll see a lot of the effects in that system. So that is going to look random and arbitrary if you're not expanding your view to look at the systems that your core system is within. When you look bigger, you'll see causes and effects that explain, that create these triggers and these loops that then have the effects in the system that you care most about. Effects are exponentially magnified by feedback loops. The recurring nature of feedback loops is relentless. It is relentlessly powerful because it's one thing to have a single cause and effect impact, but when a cause and effect is just like the tide rolling, water running over and over. I mean, you see water cut deep, deep, deep canyons into the earth because of its relentlessness, cycle after cycle after cycle that happens in every aspect of our lives. So we need to learn how to design the feedback loops with the causes we need to achieve the effects we want in the areas that we want to build. Similarly, we have to identify the cause and effect loops that are relentless in our lives, that are delivering negative results, that are creating downward spirals, and we need to break them. But if you don't identify them, you cannot break them. All right, so with that framework of systems thinking, let's start thinking about how to build a life operating system. First of all, what is a life operating system? So life operating system is generally going to combine two aspects of management: action management, the actions that you implement in your life; knowledge management, which is the overarching theme of this entire summit. It is the world of second brains; and personal knowledge management, or PKM, as you'll often hear it referred to as. So action management always starts with values and guiding principles. What do you value most in life? What gives life meaning to you? You need self-awareness. And then from that, everything flows. You design your aspirations in life, which are your highest level goals. And then you break those down into more actionable goals. And then you break the goals down into projects, and you define habits and routines that inform those goals and advance those goals. You develop projects that inform and advance those goals. And then the projects you break down into tasks. And then we have review cycles to keep things in balance. We talked earlier about one of the key aspects of systems thinking is balancing properties. Our reviews, our weekly reviews and monthly reviews, are a great example of this kind of balancing property. Systems will naturally start wobbling and get looser and get out of whack as they go. It's just the natural way of systems. There are a lot of forces, especially feedback loops, are so powerful. They are driving and hammering iteration after iteration and expanding or contracting. The review cycles, or any balancing property in a system, is going to be the constraints that help you pull the outliers back in line. When things start getting loose and wobbly, you tighten them up. That is what the review systems are for. That is applying systems thinking to our life operating system. So that's action management. That's the things we're queuing up to go out in the world and achieve. Now we have knowledge management, which is something we're going to be here, and many of the sessions following this will be delving deeper into. This is capturing ideas, that fire hose of information we're currently exposed to, capturing our own thoughts, capturing the media that in some way connects with the things we're trying to achieve. How do we aggregate that, distill it into the best insights and info? How do we then make it actionable? That is the realm of knowledge management. And a really critical part of that is to integrate it with our action management. Our knowledge management, our action management have to be deeply integrated so they inform each other. This is designing for emergence in our lives. And the more these different parts of our lives communicate and inform each other, the more emergence we can achieve, the more success, the more efficiency, the more ideas, the more output, the stronger relationships, the deeper values. We're identifying our values, the closer we can get to a life that fulfills the values and the things we find most meaningful. So once again, we see this card again. Just as we recognize that feedback loops, bottlenecks, and balancing properties are essential in systems thinking, we need to very specifically and very deliberately apply these to our life operating system. And we will talk about ways in which we can do that. So As an example of a life operating system, let's talk about pillars, pipelines, and vaults. This is the life operating system that I designed and that I teach. These principles are broadly applicable, but let's look at how we can optimize for certain results. I'm going to share my screen here. This is a structure of a life operating system. You center this here. The term pillars, pipelines, and vaults talks about the different components of such a system. So let's talk about pipelines and vaults first, because those are logical equivalents, and then we'll come back to pillars. So pipelines are going to be the action aspect of the system. Vaults are going to be the knowledge management portion of the system. So in pipelines, we're going to have our value goals, which are the goals that speak to our deepest values, the pursuit of our deepest values through high-level aspirational goals. So in other words, there are highest level aspirations. Now this is going to flow from our values and guiding principles, which is where we start. Everything starts with self-awareness. It is not a simple process to identify what we value most in life, but it is an incredibly important and rewarding step. So typically with a life operating system, you would want to go through that reflective process and develop that self-awareness. Once you have that, then based on those values and those things that give life meaning to you, you want to identify your greatest aspirations, your lifelong dreams. This is what we call value goals. Then we want to break these into outcome goals or goal outcomes so that we can measure, track, and keep an eye on whether or not we're progressing. This becomes valuable in our reviews. It's a checkpoint. Now, your goals can change at any time. None of this is concrete. This is a compass. We're going to put a lot of efforts and systems and processes and habits in place to achieve these, but you need a compass to know where you're heading. Without any compass, you will inevitably be spending a lot of time on the wrong things. So then we can achieve our outcome goals one of two ways. Either we design habits and routines in our lives, or we develop projects. Both of them or either of them can advance our goal outcomes. And then in the case of projects, we'll break them down into tasks. So this is the action management part of a life operating system. Now we're going to check in on these on a periodic basis. So on a daily basis, we're going to track things we care about. On a weekly basis, we're going to check in to make sure our action items are queued up, the right ones are queued up in alignment with the rest of the stack here. On a monthly basis, we'll roughly check to make sure our projects are the right projects queued up. Of course, you finish a project at any time. You can add another one. You can jump in here and queue this up. But at a very minimum, on a weekly basis, we're going to be lining up our tasks. On a monthly basis, we'll be lining up our projects. On a quarterly basis, we'll be checking our overall outcome goals and making sure they're aligned with their value goals. Down in the knowledge management section, we'll be having a media vault. We're capturing the aspects, the information that is relevant to the things we're trying to achieve in our lives. We'll be taking courses and training and capturing that knowledge. We'll have notes and ideas, our own thoughts. We'll be capturing that systematically. We'll be researching tools. We'll be researching service providers, people who will be software, hardware, individuals, companies. We will want to capture all that research so it's always available in the future. All of this will flow into what I call a knowledge vault, which is the aggregation, organization, and weaponization of all of this knowledge so that it's useful, active, and available for you, ready to go at any time. And anytime you work on something, you build that up, it gets stronger and stronger. So a life operating system is going to combine all these components. Now, there's a ton of value in any individual component here, any one of these. But when you combine them, they fuel each other, they enhance each other, and you start getting a greater level of this emergence. That's just an overall structure. Within the PEV system, I try to emphasize focus, alignment, and resurfacing in context. So focus is what we all know. It's the ability to sit down and do the work that we have decided to do. We have a pattern, we have a behavioral defect in most of us, myself very much, which is why I needed this kind of system, that we tell ourselves what we're going to do. We know what we should do. And then when it comes time to do it, we don't do it. If we just kept our commitments to ourselves, the way we keep commitments to other people, if you tell someone you're going to show up for lunch or a meeting, you show up, right? It's on your calendar, you show up. How many times do you tell yourself that you're going to do something and then you don't do it? We don't hold ourselves to the same commitments that we hold ourselves to other people. And this is a major problem. If we can learn to deliver our commitments to ourselves, first and foremost, it will transform our lives. This is one of the things that I wanted to design a system to optimize for, the ability to sit down and focus on that one of those 1, 2, 3 things that matter most that I say, I'm going to get done today. So focus. Alignment. This is once we've defined our highest level aspirations, once we've defined what we want to achieve in life, we then have to have day by day, hour by hour actions that get you there. But typically, your day by day, hour by hour actions are not really delivering on your highest level aspirations. We need a system that has alignment from the lowest level hourly actions to our highest level aspirations with direct connections all the way through. And this is one of the reasons I use Notion, is because it gives us that ability to have direct connections all the way through and the ability to put it all under the same umbrella. So we can dig deeper into that if that's one of the areas you want to explore further. And then there's resurfacing and context. And this is the most relevant to knowledge management. So knowledge management is going to involve capturing. It's going to involve, I think we have we've got some, let me jump ahead to the slide. So we've talked about focus and alignment. And now knowledge management is going to be collecting and curating. It's going to be extracting and aggregating value from it. And it's going to be resurfacing it in context. This is the thing I struggled most with in knowledge management, which is why I've designed systems to help support that weakness in my behaviors. And that's the thing, you need to identify the weaknesses you have and then implement systems that help compensate for those weaknesses. So I was good at capturing, I was good at extracting and analyzing, but then I would lose it. It would drift away and I would never see it again. So I've designed systems in the vaults section integrated with the action sections of my Notion PPV system so that the information I capture will resurface in the right time and place. So when I'm working on a project, all of the media I've captured relevant to that project is in that dashboard for that one project. All of my aggregated knowledge, all of my research, everything resurfaces in context. If I'm working on a client, I've got a page for that client, an entry in a database, there's a dashboard for that client, and every note or idea I've had, every media item I've captured, every assessment I've made will all resurface in context there. No matter what, if I'm working on a piece of content, every piece across the system will resurface. If I'm doing my morning startup routine, every aspect of the system that's relevant to what I'm doing that day will be queued up. Similarly, in my daily focus action zone, and etc. So anything where you have a place to get the work done, you want to have all the components you've been capturing to resurface in that context. That is part of the magic. So when you put this together, you become unstoppable. And I just want to emphasize it is completely within your power to do this. But it takes effort. It takes the intentionality. It takes design. It does not happen by default. By default, we get mess, we get disorder. By design, we can build systems that fuel each other. So now my inclination here is to jump in and show some examples in the PPV system. I've got a demo space to show, but I want to make sure that we're covering the things that are of most value to you guys. So I'll actually jump to the questions now. Do you want to see examples of some of these in a Notion PPV system? Or do you want to talk about more big picture stuff, high concept? I'm happy to go in any direction you're interested in. I'll just note, I do use Notion, and my examples are all in Notion. There are many tools that are excellent. We have so many riches of options today. It's almost a problem how many good options we have. I use Notion because I find it more than any other platform that I've used, I can build comprehensive systems where all of it comes under one umbrella. Each part can inform the other parts. Now I'm sacrificing some ability to have the very best implementation on a specific functional area. For example, I love the tasks, the interface for task management in Todoist. I prefer that to Notion. But in Todoist, I can't actually manage projects in a way that I have a window and a dashboard into every aspect of that project across my system, pulling in all the media, all my ideas, all the notes, all the content or client elements to that project. I can't do that in Todoist. I can't do that in any other platform I know, short of coding, which is going to be too expensive and too slow. So I use Notion for that reason, because it lets me implement this systems thinking approach, this comprehensive, holistic life OS concept more fully than any system I've done, but you can do it in pieces, and I'm happy to discuss that if you want to dive into that. So let's actually jump into the questions and chat and just get a sense of where you guys want to dig in. I'm happy to look
Yeah,
at...
from the chat, I think from the chat, we're seeing that people would love to see some examples. You've shared so many amazing ideas, and they want to see now how this concretely looks like in Notion.
Good. We'll jump into some of those examples, and that'll probably lead to more questions. So that's all good. All right, in that case, I'm going to share my Notion screen. A caution now, we're jumping into a fully fleshed out life operating system. Just at a glance, it's going to be overwhelming because you haven't had any onboarding, any context. I'll just say every single piece of this is laid out on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel goes through section by section. So don't feel like you need to understand everything. And I'm actually not even going to explain as I go into certain areas, but I'm going to dive into certain contexts so we can see how resurfacing occurs in some different examples. As a little setup, this is like the front dashboard that controls access to everything. The alignment zone is where we align our highest level aspirations, starting with our guiding principles, all the way down through value goals, where we set our actual dreams in life, our outcome goals, steps to get there, and then projects and habits to achieve those. Now, having said that, we have projects, right? Everybody has projects. We want to have active projects and potential future projects queued up. You don't want to have a flood of projects, so you're not going to get anything done. So we're going to be very deliberate about minimizing the number of active projects so we can realistically achieve the things that matter most. Again, alignment lets us prioritize ruthlessly so that we are doing the things that really matter, not just moving on a treadmill or moving inches across an unruly number of projects. But let's open one of these projects. And again, if you're new to Notion, don't worry about the details here. But the concept is we go into one of these projects. This is a project, it's an example. And this is a dashboard for that project. Inside this dashboard, we've got a lot of properties up here, but don't worry about those. Down here, we've got the things that matter to actually achieve this project. We could have thoughts, reminders, and notes, but most importantly, we have our action items. You achieve a project by going through a series of tasks. I call tasks action items. So if you have an active project, you must have at least one active task or it's stuck. It's hit a wall. You must always have at least one active task, and we can make sure that this project has at least one, if not 2 or 3 active tasks. Then we have the future tasks all queued up. We've got a task progress tracker to evaluate at a glance how we're progressing through that. We can always add new ones. New actions will come up in any project as we go. We're maintaining that. But we have clarity on what we need to do first, what we're doing next to advance this. And if we just do that on the date we schedule it, I advocate using a due date, not a DUE date, but a DO date. Schedule the date you plan to do it. And what this does is it removes this overwhelming burden of to-do lists and makes a tiny little mini to-do list for each day of the week. A list that is doable, that is achievable and viable. Maybe a reach, but it's doable. So we're queuing them up and we have our list here. Now down here we have the knowledge management element of the system, the vaults, pulling in to the project. Notes and meetings are all captured in a notes and meetings database, and there's a distinction between which are meetings and which are notes, and they're all listed here. So anything that's captured is identified as being a part of this project, just as all these tasks are identified as being part of the project, and therefore we can queue them up in the specific project dashboard, self-filtered for those. We're similarly pulling in, self-filtering for all the notes and meetings, which are all of the spontaneous thoughts and ideas we had, all the discussions with other people we had, are all connected to this project, so we see it resurfacing in this dashboard. Similarly, our knowledge topics, where we're aggregating all of our media and our notes and ideas and all of this, our best thinking is put together topic by topic, and all the topics we're interested in our lives, personal and professional. But the ones that are related to this project are attached to this project, and therefore when we look at the project dashboard, they are self-filtering for that. Similarly, let's look at the action zone. So this is the focus area of the system. This is what I need to work on today. I look at just this. I'm not looking at the whole week. I'm not looking at the next 3 days. I'm looking at the one day. And I know that the things resurfacing in here across the system are the right things because I have the alignment zone and everything has been designed so that only the ones with the DO date, due date for today, are resurfacing for today in order. We prioritize these the night before. Every night before, we line up what we're doing the next day. That's the final check, but it's already largely queued up, so it takes almost no time to just finalize the priorities and bump anything that's beyond what's realistic for any given day. And we do that. So we've got resurfacing and context here. We've got our daily tracking if we want to track habits or any performance we want to monitor over time. We've got a beautiful calendar view that lines up everything. Because we're assigning DO dates, we have a very specific list of everything that is we are going to do DO on that specific day. And it's just pure clarity, nothing to take us off track. Within these, we'll have a dashboard or any relevant notes and relations to other parts of the system that are related to any of those individual tasks. And then down here, we can connect them to client operations. We have our active projects and our goal outcomes. Similarly, in our mind expansion area, which is my dashboard for knowledge management, go back to alignment zone here. Whoop, that's the wrong one. We'll go back to the command center and then jump into the mind expansion dashboard, which is where we manage all of our knowledge and incoming information. So we can organize the books we're reading. We can organize the articles we've captured. This is all in a single database. They're just filtered. Each of these views are filtered for that type of content. Here's the video, our courses, our Twitter threads, our podcasts, or whatever kind of content you're routinely capturing. Then we have our notes and ideas, which we can put here. Capturing them quick. You have a quick entry port on every page that you spend any amount of time on. So you always have the ability to quickly capture a thought or idea. And then the knowledge aggregation is the knowledge vault. So these are organized by topic. Everything else up here is coming in. Each entry is a media source, an item, a piece of content, but that's not a topic. The knowledge vault, where we aggregate all this information on all these sources, is the topic organization across the entire system of all the topics we're interested in. Some of them are business, some of them are personal, some of them are fitness, family, whatever. We can sort and filter them. We have the pillars or the organizational structure overall, so we can also sort and filter by categories of our life. I'm getting a little broad here in the explanation, so I'm going to zero in on the knowledge topics. Say you pick a topic, say we're interested in art and culture. This is another dashboard of everything across the entire system that is relevant to this topic. And it's resurfacing in context. So all of our notes and ideas, we click here. All of the notes and ideas that are associated with this topic are connected through a relational link in a database, and they're all listed here. Whenever I come into work on art and culture, if say I were going to make a video or write an article or go to a meeting or do a presentation, or even just think or reflect on it, I would go here to this topic, and there'll be a topic for everything I'm interested in. If there isn't one, I'll start a new one. The template will automatically apply these. And as I capture notes, meetings, and ideas, they will be the ones relevant to this topic. In this case, art and culture will be connected through that relational link, and they will all resurface here in context. All my media related to art and culture will be connected through a relational link, and it will all surface here in context. So I sit down to work on something, everything I've captured, everything I've thought about and entered, everything I've read or watched that I thought was worth saving into the system will resurface when I sit down to work on this topic. I will have forgotten about 95 or 98% of these. I won't remember them, but when I sit down, they're here in the context where I'm doing the work on that topic. Again, tools and skills and services. As I research software, hardware, it all resurfaces here. So I have client dashboards. Whenever I open a client dashboard and start to do the work of serving that client, everything across the system related to that client will resurface in that client dashboard. That's what I mean by resurfacing in context. That gives you, it reminds you of things, it inspires ideas, it shows connections that you never would have had if it didn't all resurface in the same context. So we've touched here on the alignment of your highest level aspirations to your daily and hourly actions. And we've touched on resurfacing in context. Where else would you like to explore? You want to go deeper into this? Any specific use cases? Let's go to the questions and see what people want to explore.
Yeah, I've already wrote down some great questions that came up in the Q&A.
Awesome.
So for example, I saw that some people would want to know, how do you make the system like easy to manage? Like, how do you minimize the maintenance of it so that the upkeep of the system itself doesn't take away from like actually doing the work?
That's a great question. That is an outstanding question. All right. So I want to distinguish between two things in terms of work on the system. There is the initial setup, which for a system like that is inevitably going to be a bit of an investment. There's just no getting around that. So there's the initial creation and build, and you can facilitate that by starting with an existing system. That's where I think systems like PPV and similar ones give you a leg up, because most people, first of all, don't have a systems thinking background and aren't really system builders. So you can start with one that's proven, but the beauty of Notion is you can then customize it endlessly. So you can facilitate that startup cost by working with a structure that is established and then build from there. But that's not the heart of the question. The question is maintaining. So once you have it in place, then it actually simplifies your life. That's one of the big misconceptions I see over and over, because people who haven't implemented this will look at the initial build. They'll say, this is too much. It's overwhelming. It's not, it's just too much time on the build. Well, yes, there is an initial investment, but really anything that's going to have a transformational impact on your life is going to require some upfront effort, right? The bigger the change, the bigger the initial effort. Once this is in place, this simplifies my life so much. It brings so much clarity and transparency into what I need to do, when I need to do it. It just gives me guidance. What was before just fog, now I see the path and I see the destination and I see the steps between here and there. And it just facilitates easier movements. But you do still have some maintenance, as we've talked about, but the maintenance is largely doing the work. So we have morning startup routines. I'll spend somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes, usually 10 to 15 minutes, entering some data that I'm tracking that I think is helpful, and the information I'll derive from tracking it will be revealing. So it takes some time to enter that, because a lot of this isn't automated, unfortunately. One day we'll be able to automate all this. But right now there is manual entry. There's a startup routine. But if I do that startup routine, which involves a mindset practice and visualization and my data entry and queuing up the one or two things that really matter, defining what success will be for that day, takes a few minutes to identify the one or two things. If I just get those one or two things done, this day will be a success, even if I get nothing else done. Usually, ultimately, a successful day comes down to one or two things, but they're usually the things you put off and don't do. So identify that up front. So all that in a morning routine for 15 minutes. That takes 15 minutes. Okay, so that was a cost. But the benefit of having spent that 15 minutes is I am primed. I am now unstoppable. I have so much clarity. I have a default path in line. I have visualized and mapped out what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. I know it's the right thing to do because it's aligned in my alignment zone. So the benefit of that 15 minutes, of spending that 15 minutes, is a force multiplier across every other hour the rest of the day. I could save that 15 minutes and then have much less productive hours the rest of the day. But there's just no comparison between what I get out of having primed myself versus what I spent on it. Similarly with reviews, weekly reviews, monthly reviews. Yeah, they take time. They take, in a rush. It's better to do a rush job than to not do it at all. But I can rush it in 10 minutes. But really, to do it properly takes 20, 25 minutes. Okay, so that's a cost. Every weekend I need to spend 20, 25 minutes. But the force multiplier on my week of having spent that 20, 25 minutes is there's just no comparison. The clarity of what I'm doing, the knowing I'm doing the right things, just even prepping my mind to psych up for it, and then cleaning up the clutter that I have to wade through and all different aspects of my system and all this. I don't have to clean up as I go because everything's tidy in the first place. You just get so much more performance out of it for a relatively small investment in time. So I hear people say it's too much to do weekly reviews. Well, you are missing so much performance by not spending that cost of that 20 minutes. So, it's up to you what you want to do. It's your choice, right? But look for things that are force multipliers and spend your time wisely. Don't waste it. Don't do stupid things, but do things that have a clear, measurable, high impact result on the rest of your hours. Sleep is another example. Get the sleep you need. Do your weekly reviews, do your morning startup routine. I have an evening wind down routine, which takes like 15 minutes. By doing that, my next day is queued up, teed up, and again, so much clarity, so much better performance hour by hour because I spent 15 minutes the night before and the morning of. I hope that helps. Happy to get into specific examples of things that people feel are too much maintenance. But once this is in place, the maintenance is just the start up in the morning, start up, wind down in the evening, and the weekly, monthly reviews. Quarterly reviews, annual reviews. It's really not that much maintenance.
Excellent answer. Couldn't agree more. Another topic that a lot of people wonder about is the kind of like work versus private life. Like, do you have basically one PPV system for your private life and one for your work, or do you combine those? How do you handle this?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this one gets to some Notion-specific issues, but let's talk about it in general first. So generally speaking, I find it's way better, if possible, to have a single system that's deeply integrated. Because as I said earlier, your work is part of your life. This is not a separate thing. It's not like you're turning a work switch on and your life, home life switch on. Some people try to do that, but it's a false structure, right? It's just not real. The reality is we are ourselves, and our work is a big part of our life, and our life outside of work, hopefully, is a big part of our lives and should be. So it is one thing. So I feel if you're going to design a system to optimize across your whole life, it needs to all be combined. Now, in a practical sense, you can't always do that. If you work for a company, they're going to have their own project task management system. And the Notion specific thing is there are some real privacy issues. Even if you are the founder or boss of your company, you can't necessarily in Notion, you can't have privacy controls in a single database. So you can't have a task database. Some are private and only visible to you, and some are visible to the team you work on. You can't do that in Notion, or it's really cumbersome to do workarounds. So if you work on a team or you work for a company where you don't even have a choice, you're going to have a separate segment that is for the daily activities of that work. And that's fine. You can draw a very clear line of where that system starts and ends and where your personal system starts and ends. But even when you have a separate work system for project and task management, you still have work elements in your personal system, because you still have to manage your career. You still have to manage your goals in terms of business, if you're running a business, or your career, if you're working for someone else, or whatever work is in your life. You want to map out where you want to go, what the stepping stones are. You don't necessarily want to broadcast to your team that this job is a stepping stone and you're using it to get the next thing and you hope the next thing comes soon. You still want to map out your personal pathway in order to, design the career you want, the business you want, the work you want. So you still have a business element inside of your personal system, even if your daily activities are managed in a separate system. But you definitely do not want to manage duplicates. You don't want to have projects and tasks in both. You're not going to be copying back and forth. Draw a very sharp line. What's done in the company system, what's done in your personal system. But if you're a solopreneur or a small business owner, you can often combine them into one. And that's really the best if you can, because then you have more of this interconnectivity and fueling of each other. It's just going to be very case by case specific, but draw a line. It doesn't all have to be in the same system, but to the extent you can, there are a lot of advantages to doing so. Again, another reason I use Notion is because I can do that to a greater degree in Notion than any other system that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, and queuing onto this question, what do you think about a system from the perspective of collaboration? I got this question, I saw this question in the Q&A as well. Is there a way do you collaborate with someone maybe on your system? Are there other people who can add tasks to it, for example, or
That's a great question.
How do you think about that?
These guys are asking good questions. I like this. It's more fun when the questions are so on point. Yeah, 100%. Tiago's opening earlier today, one of the things was don't work in isolation. That's one of the ways you can self-sabotage yourself, is working in isolation. So a system that can facilitate collaboration, if you're already doing all your work in a system, the ability to share pages, to share access to limited privacy controlled areas is hugely valuable. Then all the work that you're sharing and all the input from your team, it's all connected. Now, the issue becomes your teammates have a system, you have a system. Are they the same system? Okay, well, you can negotiate that with your teammates. But to the extent you can share parts of your system and have input and collaboration with others, this could be work, this could be family, this could be sharing a calendar. That's a collaboration with your family. This could be creative projects, anything. Yeah, absolutely. The more it all fits together and informs and communicates with each other, the more powerful it is and the more emergence arises from it. So the ability to have privacy controlled segments, there are some limitations we talked about in databases, but in Notion, when it comes to pages, it's phenomenal for sharing individual pages for collaboration. And it's just tailor-made for what you're asking. Other tools do this well also to varying degrees. But yeah, look for, that gets to be a thing when you're picking your tools, right? You don't want to be tool hopping all the time. But if you pick a tool that lets you do a comprehensive system with the action aspects of your life, the knowledge aspects of your life, and then the collaboration, that's going to largely connect with the action aspects. So you've got projects, you've got content creation, you've got client stuff. All of those can be enhanced by collaboration. But then if you can also share aspects of your knowledge management system on those projects with those people selectively, it's a beautiful, you're building feedback loops upon feedback loops of productivity there.
Love it. Yeah. What about ad hoc requests in your task manager? Like you can line up nicely your task for the next day, but we know always life kind of like gets in the way, and some ad hoc request comes in, or a task that you had planned for the day, actually you don't finish it, it runs over into the next day. How do you deal with when life gets busy and crazy?
Oh, I love this question too. This is such a great audience here. By lining up your tasks, you are far better able to handle unexpected things that arise because you have something to compare it to. You're going to have to make a decision when the surprise event occurs during your day. But if you don't have a clearly defined day with a doable but laid out action list, then you're just going to react to whatever comes up. The surprise will take over by default because you don't have a clear path already, and suddenly this is popped up in your attention. Okay, I'm just going to follow that, right? That's what I used to do. That's what most people do. So if you have a clearly defined day, these are my priorities in this order. This is the one or two things I really need to get done today. You have this mapped out, and then a surprise arises. Now you can compare it specifically to the thing that is clearly mapped as what you were planning to do. Now you can make a one-to-one comparison on which is more important. And oftentimes the surprise thing is more important, and you go do it. This other thing now becomes the next priority. But if you don't have a map for the day, a design for the day, you have no way to evaluate this new thing, and you will inevitably not make the smart decision. Most often, you'll just chase it whatever it is. So by designing your day, you have a clear choice to make in priorities and the ability to decide which is the better priority. Anytime you have a plan, whether it's a goal or a project with a deadline that you've self-imposed or a task, you can change it anytime. You are free to change it anytime. But the whole purpose here is to be intentional so that we have a game plan aligned with our compass. And we're going to do that unless something more important comes up. But the only way we know something more important is actually more important is because we have a designed day to compare it against. I hope that's helpful.
I do think so. Yes.
Good.
I would love to ask you again about the concept of emergence. How do you actually then utilize those connections between the vaults and the resources? And another person or attendee also asked, like, how do you make sure that this emergence isn't generating kind of like unnecessary noise in your data, or feeding you something that's not useful?
Well, I'd say if it's noise, then it's not really emergence. So emergence is a quality or property that presumably is a benefit. So that's just a definitional issue. But any benefit that comes out, first of all, think of how much benefit is going to come out from having you capture all these ideas in your notes. As you spontaneously have them, you get them down. You capture all these articles, these videos that are really relevant to what you're doing. You capture them, and they're related to the right projects. Then you sit down to work on the project. If you hadn't had these relational connections and hadn't captured them, how many of those do you think you'd remember? like very few of them, right? You're not going to remember them. Or if you had them in a separate system, so you captured, you say you wrote them down, or you put them in a totally separate system that's not related here, so they're not resurfacing in that project, you're still not going to remember them in the most cases. You could go search, and that could help, but A, you have to remember to search, and B, what are you going to search for? You'll catch some of them, but you won't catch all of them. When they're all connected in the same system to the specific projects, they all resurface. Every single one of them. You don't miss any of them. And then you have these to compare and bounce off of each other. The resource that is sitting there waiting for you when you sit down to do the work, because you captured them in this way with the right relational links, that is emergence. Like, it is providing visibility to all of your past thinking leading up to this point on this project. And you can just do so much more, and you don't have to spend time going and looking for it, so you can do it faster. You're gonna have better ideas because you're capturing all these things. So that's just one of many examples. The clarity itself, the transparency into what you're doing, where you're going, what you need to work on today, that transparency is itself emergence, right? It's a benefit that wouldn't have been there if all these pieces were fragmented and not connected. So the simplest things are really powerful emergence. Clarity on what you're doing, alignment, all of the ideas and notes and inspirations you've had at any point prior to this moment, right there when you work on that project, or when you open that topic of interest, or when you open that client page, or when you start your morning routine, or when you sit down to do your daily activities, everything across your life that is relevant to that is right there, not a piece missing. That supercharges your ability to do things and to do it quicker. So we could talk, and the emergence is everywhere once you start looking for it. Start thinking this way and looking for that emergence in anything you do or anything you're observing in sports, in society, in politics. It's everywhere. And the more you start observing it, the better you can sort of see these cause and effect feedback loops fueling them everywhere. The habits we build are feedback loops, positive ones or negative ones. The ability to intentionally design those and then track and inspire ourselves to do them through some gamification provides the emergence of the benefit of the positive feedback loop compounding over time. That's emergence.
Great. Okay. We've already approached the top of the hour. So one very last question. Thank you so much for this excellent presentation and answering all our questions. What are the best next steps for someone who wants to get started with the system, and what are some of the resources that can help someone get started?
Well, in terms of this system, the easiest and freest is my YouTube channel. So that's easy there. But a system in general, I do think if you're trying to put together a comprehensive system, it really helps to start with an established system. So this system, PPV, is designed for that, to give you a big head start. I have a course that is much more comprehensive. It's faster, and it has a community around it. The YouTube channel is free. That's a powerful way to do it. Or you can design your own system. It's going to take longer. It's going to be more trial and error, but it's totally doable. So you can start building your own systems. And if you want to use Notion, it gives you all the tools to do that. If you want to do other platforms, you can connect different platforms and to some degree have them communicate with each other. It's just a lot harder. But again, there are pros and cons for a specialty tool that might have some specialty features, or a universal build your own. See, to me, Notion isn't a note-taking app or a productivity tool. It's a development platform. So I chose it to build the system that worked best for me. And it turns out, having taught and coached this for a long time, it works well for a lot of people. So I feel the best of both worlds in Notion is to get an established system like PPV and then optimize and customize. So it's not like buying software elsewhere where you get the software and you do it the software's way. You get the software and then you can endlessly customize to your own preferences. So I think that's the fastest and easiest, but there's nothing wrong with building it yourself and then you know it even more intimately. It's just a slower, longer process.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It was so great. It was so great having you. And I think we had a lot of great takeaways from the session.
Oh, this was a blast. This was such a privilege to do. I'm so excited to be a part of this. What you and Tiago and the whole team have put together here is extraordinary. I'm very excited to look at, to watch the other events from this extraordinary group of people. What an extraordinary collection of teachers and experts. So thank you. It's been exciting to be a part of this.